So yeah, so I've known Osadha for quite a long time actually. I was thinking I've known him since the last millennia. I met him in '99 in Cambridge, and well, actually, I've lived with Osadha about as long as I've lived with anybody, apart from Pavara and my family. So I've got quite a good feel for him, I think. And I I was thinking about what to say, and one of a few things occurred to me. One is that I'm always happy to see Osadha. Always, I've never been unhappy to see Osadha. He's just a really lovely person to be with. He's extremely good company, very, very intelligent, very sensitive, very thoughtful, very considerate. And I thought, in a way, I can honestly say that I've always been happy to see him. I'm always happy to see him. And that was one thing that I thought. And I also thought that I can't imagine falling out with Osadha. In fact, I don't know anybody who's fallen out with Osadha, um, which again is quite a thing to say. And I've been in quite a lot of situations with him. I've been with him, and I've lived with him. I've also worked with him quite intensively. We used to do these trade shows together, which was quite a logistical operation and quite a lot of pressure, a lot of money, a lot of uh, time constraints, a lot of travel, a lot of different people involved, a lot of different strands coming together. And again, I never remember kind of losing his rag or getting really cranky or anything. He's got this lovely equanimity. He's just a lovely kind of smooth presence. I don't. Again, I was thinking. I don't think I've ever seen Osler in a flap. He might be under pressure, but he doesn't get in a flap. And it's just really it's kind of just a wonderfully reassuring person to be around. Um, so yeah, and it's interesting. I was thinking of his name. Osidum is the name of the morning star, and traditionally it's associated with healing. And probably that's why he got this name. This sort of healing and reassuring and comforting and confidence giving about being with Osada. So um, yeah, there's a lot I could say, but that was really what really sort of came to me when I was thinking about Osada. Um, he's also got a lovely kind of. I remember this one little moment. Now we used to work in this warehouse, which was a gift wholesaler, basically a big warehouse full of lots of boxes. And I remember one of our jobs was we used to take care of some of the more pernickety customers, and Debenhams was one of our customers. And doing an order for Debenhams meant kind of you had to print out all these stickers, and every box had to have a different sticker with a different. It was really complex. So I remember doing one of these orders, and I remember asking. I remember we were chatting away, and I remember asking you about Yates. I'd heard of this character called Yates. I was recently arrived from New Zealand, and we kind of poetry's not really a big thing in New Zealand. We do have it, but it's kind of not such a big thing. And I remember people were talking about Yates, and I remember asking you about something about Yates, and you said, poetry or something like that. And I got the feeling that there was an element of your life that was just kind of gurgling away in the background a lot of the time. The sort of this kind of sort of not just a affection, a love for poetry, but a kind of poetic sensibility. So I always think Oster's got a sort of a poetic sensibility. Um, and it was just a lovely little moment because your eyes kind of lit up a bit, and then we had a conversation about poetry whilst we were packing this Debenhams order, which was kind of quite emblematic of Windhorse Trading where we worked at that time. This Buddhist business where we worked. It was wonderful to operate on different levels like that. Um, and what's lovely actually, it's one of the lovely things about True Runner is you get to know people and you get to know them over a long period of time. And I've seen Isada's life kind of unfold as my life's unfolded. And one of the things that's been really fascinating actually is I've got to know quite a few people who've become parents. And I just wanted to rejoice actually in what a devoted father Osada is. And I've really loved seeing that just a different sort of side of him come out, and just how devoted he is to his kids and his family. It's really touching. And I don't know. I mean, I don't think, because of karma and all that, I don't think one can take credit entirely for one's children. But Osadha and Yaneshri's children are just so delightful. I'm sure it's partly because Osadha and Yaneshri are such delightful people and such good people. So it's been lovely to see that actually over the years, and it's been lovely as well in more recent years just to see Osadha getting more involved with communicating the Dharma, and right through that whole time that gurgling away has been continuing, and I think particularly in the last few years there's been a real renaissance almost in Osadha, particularly in terms of a real love and a real kind of passion almost for getting to grips with what the Dharma is communicating about the nature of experience, the nature of consciousness, the nature of reality, and it's just been really great to see that happen. And I'm looking forward to hearing what he's going to say. I could say a lot more, but I'm just really delighted that you're here with us, Osadha. And like I said, I'm really curious to hear what you're going to say. The title of your talk is Buddha Nowhere Else. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Darren. It was very kind of you. Thank you very much. My life, the last 20-something years, just flashed before me there. Okay, so it is said that the Buddha gave 84,000 different teachings in the course of his teaching career, which lasted approximately 45 years. So the story goes that he was enlightened at the age of 35 under the Bodhi tree in what's now called Bodh Gaya. And he spent the next 45 years wandering around, meeting people, communicating what he had discovered until he died around the age of 80, as far as I'm aware. And in that time, he would have met loads of different people, either being invited to places or people seeking him out, because there was such a rich culture and tradition of spiritual seeking at that time, and lots of bands of these mendicants wandering around looking for teachers and looking for teachings and so on. And the Buddha would have been one of the more prominent ones. So he would have received a lot of visitors who would ask him questions, and he'd always communicate what he had discovered, that night under the Bodhi tree. And as I said, apparently he gave 84,000 different teachings. So it wasn't like he had just one sort of teaching that he would give to everybody. I mean, in essence, he had one, in the sense that he was pointing to the same thing each time, but he would use different metaphors and different similes and images depending on who he was with. So if he was talking to, say, a farmer, he would use farming analogies and so on, to make it more understandable for that person. So he was enlightened at the age of 35 after about 6 years of seeking. He left the so-called palace. We don't really know what kind of a home environment he had, well off at least. At the age of 29, he left that, and he wandered for 6 years seeking something, which he then discovered at the age of 35 under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, and then spent the remainder of his life teaching it to whoever was interested in hearing it, basically. And as I said, he used loads and loads of different means to try and communicate. Like, all the teachings of the Buddha are said to be like finger pointing at the moon. You've probably heard that before. So you don't look at the finger, you look at where the finger is pointing, up to the moon. So he gave all these different teachings depending on who he was with. So the first teaching he gave was with what's known as the group of five. These are the five friends or followers he had when he was practicing austerities. So prior to enlightenment, he would practice austerities, mortifying the flesh, holding his breath, standing on one leg, all these practices to try and seek liberation. Now, in the end, he decided that it wasn't working, so he left the group of five They accused him of reverting to luxury because he ate a bit of rice, and he went off on his own to the Bodhi tree, discovered what he'd been looking for, and the first people he sought out was the group of 5 again. So he walked from Bodh Gaya to Sarnath, which is, I don't know how far it is, it's quite a distance. If you're on a train, at least an overnight train journey. And he met them again. How he found them there, I don't know, but he found them there, and he approached them. And I don't know if you can imagine the scene. The Buddha is probably completely in rags, dirty, matted hair, dirt under his fingernails. You know, he wouldn't be too bothered about personal appearance when he was sitting under the Bodhi tree. And he had discovered what he'd been looking for. So you can sort of imagine his, I don't know, enthusiasm, his excitement. He's going to meet the 5 people who he thinks will understand what he has discovered. And it's this little passage, little paragraph that you get in the Pali Canon, which I absolutely love. And it's really worth hearing and even memorizing, because it just expresses something of the Buddha's conviction, his enthusiasm, his encouragement of what he has discovered. So he meets the group of 5 and he says to them, well, he had to say this 3 times because they didn't believe him at first. They thought he was lazy. And as I said, they thought he had reverted to luxury because he was eating again. But he said, no, have you ever known me to talk like this before? And then they said, okay, we haven't. So they gave him a chance. They listened to him. And this is what he said. He said, listen, bhikkhus. And of course, by bhikkhus, what he means is us. Okay, so he could be saying, listen, you. The deathless has been attained. I shall instruct you. I shall teach you the Dhamma. By practicing as you are instructed, you will, by realizing it here and now through direct knowledge, enter upon and dwell in that supreme goal of the holy life, for the sake of which clansmen rightly go forth from the house life into homelessness. So the first thing he says is, listen, the deathless has been attained. And this weekend has been focused on death, and that can provoke all sorts of reactions, fear and so on, which is perfectly understandable. But the Buddha had discovered or attained, I mean, there's no really adequate word to use. Attain is misleading. Discover is better, I think. He had discovered the deathless. Now, what that means is very hard to know exactly until you're there yourself, so to speak. So he had discovered, well, I don't really know what to say, a state of being. That's the wrong way of describing it, because it's not a state, but something that is beyond birth and beyond death. Yeah? Beyond birth and beyond death, beyond time, beyond space, beyond all suffering. He had discovered this. And he said that we can discover this for ourselves by practicing, what he teaches. It's like the Buddha drew a map and said, here is a map. If you follow the way, follow this map in your own experience, you will discover for yourself what I'm talking about. You will discover for yourself. You will discover the deathless. Okay, and the Buddha's concern was always trying to communicate the end of suffering. Yeah, so he wasn't interested in helping people with their stress or helping them to have a life that's a bit more comfortable. Yeah, mindfulness is so popular these days that a lot of the time the way it's taught is about stress reduction and so on, and that is all, that's good. It is well and good that people do get respite from anxiety and stress. I'm not knocking that, but the Buddha is saying, like, well, don't just stop there. That's just the beginning. You can attain to the end of suffering. So it's a bit like you're in a prison cell and you find the environment stressful, difficult. You could put some nice flowers in there. You could paint the bars a nice color and it make things a bit more comfortable. Or you could listen to the Buddha see where he's pointing, and he's saying, well, the best thing you can do is get out of the prison cell. That's the best thing to do. So he was always concerned to pointing towards the exit, if you like, the way beyond suffering to the deathless. So, as I said, in the course of his teaching career, so to speak, he gave 84,000 teachings. That's what they say. Now, 84,000 is an awful lot. I don't have loads of time, but I'll just quickly run through them all. No, I won't. But one little story that I quite like is the story of Kisagotami. I don't know if you had this already in the weekend from Vajrashura or Panyamai, okay. It's good because it concerns death, which is the theme of the weekend. It concerns death. So Kisagotami was this young woman who had an infant who died, and she was distraught with grief. And she heard about the Buddha. So she thought, well, if I go to the Buddha can bring my baby back to life. Okay. So she sought out the Buddha, went to the Buddha, explained her predicament. And it's really interesting what the Buddha did. Yeah. He communicated to her in a way that she would understand. So he said to her, well, if you go and get me a mustard seed, but it has to be a mustard seed from a home, a household that has not experienced death in any way, then I will help you. So he didn't kind of say to her, oh, don't worry about that. Everybody dies. Everything's okay. Because that would have been meaningless. It's like taking a hammer and hitting someone over the head with the Dharma. You don't do that. You got to be appropriate. So the Buddha was, he had, seems to me, a special ability to communicate with people, to know what the best way was to communicate with them. So this is what he said to Kisagotami: go and find a mustard seed from a household that hasn't experienced that. So off she went, knocking on doors. Sure enough, every household she went to, they had all experienced death. Maybe somebody in the house had died, maybe a relative of theirs, but nobody was untouched by death. And by having this experience, she saw for herself the universality of death. Yeah. So it wasn't that she took on this idea of death as a conceptual teaching, everybody dies. She went and she really experienced it by trying to find this mustard seed from a household that hadn't experienced that. And that was a breakthrough for her. And then she became a follower of the Buddha. Now, it's easy to think, particularly when you read all these stories from the Pali Canon, that then Kisagotami kind of skipped away and lived happily ever after, kind of thing. I don't think it's quite like that. I'm sure she still experienced grief, the grief for her loss, which is a perfectly natural human experience. It's part of, the drama of human existence. These things happen. I'm sure she experienced the grief, but the difference this time was she wouldn't have been going, oh, why me? It's not fair. Why did this have to happen to me? Can't we change things? She would have accepted the reality of the situation and allowed the grief to come and then the grief to go. Yeah. So it's, as I said, it's easy to think that when you read these stories, because the way they're being transcribed, it's like they all kind of lived happily ever after and, never experienced anything unpleasant ever again. I don't think it's like that. Even the Buddha experienced unpleasantness in his life. He had back trouble, for instance, when he was older. So I'm going to look at teaching number 83,999, which was his final exhortation. Yeah. Now, I don't think the 84,000 is quite literal. I just think it means a lot. He gave a lot of teachings, and it expresses the ability of the Dharma to adapt to different situations and to communicate individually with each person. And had the Buddha lived for another 50 years, he would have communicated another 84,000 teachings. So I just think it means a lot. But I want to look at his final exhortation and his death being his final teaching when he actually passed away. So first of all, I'm going to look at the last thing he said before he died. So the Buddha had gathered the assembly for his last teaching. he had asked them, does anybody have any questions, anything that's unclear? Now is your chance to say so. This is your last chance to ask me. Everybody remained silent. And then he said, maybe you feel a little bit shy about speaking out in front of everybody. Ask your friend to ask me on your behalf. And again, the assembly remained silent. So the Buddha felt satisfied that he had communicated what he had discovered that night in Bodh Gaya. He'd communicated to this group of people, and they had seen it with their own eyes, through their own direct experience. They had entered upon and dwelled in the supreme goal of the holy life, etc., etc. So the Buddha felt happy. So then he gave his final exhortation, his final verbal communication. And I suppose at this point, I mean, I don't know what he was thinking, but it's probably something like, I better get this right. You know, this is my last chance to say something meaningful, you know. So what he said at the very, very end is really, really interesting. I think I've been reflecting on it a lot this week. In a way, it kind of summarized the whole of his teaching, or at least that's how I've been looking at it myself. So the way that it's been translated, and the most common way that we use in Triratna is, where's it gone? He said, impermanent are all compound things. With mindfulness, strive on. Now that's one translation. Ideally, you go back to the original Pali and familiarize yourself with the meaning of all those words. But even Pali wasn't the language that the Buddha used, so we've got translations of translations. So impermanent are all compound things, with mindfulness strive on. That's in Triratna, that seems to be the most common translation that is used. I came across another translation just to share this one with you. He said, it is in the nature of all formations to dissolve, attain perfection through diligence. So it kind of points towards the same area. I think it's good to get different translations of these terms, as they all are fingers pointing at the moon, and it just helps you get a better sense of what the Buddha was trying to communicate. So I'm going to go back to the version that's most common in Triratna. Impermanent are all compound things, with mindfulness strive on. So the first word is impermanent. So what he's saying is, look at impermanence. That is your gateway, that is your entryway into understanding what I have attained, achieved, realized, discovered, whatever what I have woken to. Impermanence, okay? And the most obvious example of impermanence is death, our own death. So it is good to reflect on that. It might seem antisocial in other environments. You talk about your own death, people don't really want to know about it, and you can understand that because it does bring up fears and so on. But it is useful to reflect on that. You know, Buddhism in a way is a preparation for that, or as Sangharakshita once described it as, it's a reflection on the shortness and the uniqueness of life. That's what Buddhism is, a reflection on the shortness and the uniqueness of life. And we forget that, but when we encounter death, it's there, you know, right in our faces. We're brought face to face with it. We've all experienced that, you know, one form or another. Everybody does. So noticing impermanence is, as I said, a kind of an entryway into the Buddha's teaching. So we can notice the impermanence of our day-to-day life, day and night, in-breath, out-breath, passage of time, our mental states. We feel one way in the morning, we feel a different way in the afternoon. What happened to that morning state? Where did it go? Did you notice it leaving? Did you notice it dissolving? And how come this new mental state came into being? You know, just noticing over the course of a day, course of a week, how everything changes. Nothing stays still. And it's important to look at this experientially, the way that Kissa Gotami did, or the way that the Buddha encouraged her to do. And it's not to have just a conceptual idea of impermanence. So for example, you can look at, say, an apple, And you can say, I know this apple is impermanent because I know that in time it'll begin to discolor and rot and decompose and so on. But all of that is just conceptual belief. Yes, it is true that that will happen, but in the moment of looking at that apple or any object, you've got to look beyond just the conceptual. It's about the experience of impermanence. Really seeing, well, asking yourself the question, can permanence be found in experience? You know, can permanence be found in experience? So really, really looking experientially. So not just taking these things on as beliefs or holding them as conceptual ideas, but they're all pointing towards something. So you're going to look at your experience, look at the impermanent nature of experience. Everything is constantly moving, changing, coming into being and passing out of being. As soon as they come into being, at the same time, they're disappearing from being. You know, nothing stands still. And as I said, death does bring us face to face with that, you know, and that does bring up fear. But with impermanence, there can be beauty. Well, there is beauty, you know. So I don't know if you've ever had the experience of, you know, you experience a bereavement, and in mixed in with all the grief and the sadness, there is a sense of beauty. Yeah, I've certainly experienced that. There's just a sense of beauty, and that's not to deny the grief and everything else, but there's just this kind of beauty, and I think it's because impermanence points to beauty. So, for example, you go into a room and you see a beautifully arranged vase of flowers on a table, and you go, oh, look, the flowers are lovely. And you walk towards them, maybe you go to inspect them further or smell them. And as you get to them, you realize they're plastic flowers. Your response is going to be one of disappointment. Oh, they're plastic. Because when they're real, they're impermanent. I mean, plastic is impermanent as well, of course, but you know, you get the point. So, you know that they're transitory. And in their transitoriness, there is a beauty. In their passing, in their coming to being, is a beauty. So death can open a gateway to beauty. Yeah. So we shouldn't be afraid of that. There's a beauty in it as well. And it, you know, the dead are many, the living are few. It happens to us. You know, it's just part of the deal. Is what happens. I'll just quickly share something that happened to me maybe about, I don't know, 20 something years ago. I don't think I was a mitra. I think it was just before I became a mitra. A couple of months before I became a mitra. I was living in a flat in Rathmines. I went through that phase with 3 others. And one of my flatmates, Brian, was killed in a caving accident. He drowned in a caving accident. There's 3 of them drowned, actually. And I knew 2 of them. I knew Brian and another chap, Philip. And after Brian died, his brother gave me a couple of books belonging to Brian. And he had a bit of an interest in Buddhism. I went to the center with him one night, hoping to spark him off. And he kind of had an interest. But anyway, so his brother gave me a couple of books belonging to Brian. They're books on Buddhism, Zen Buddhism. And I remember I opened one of them and I found a little piece of paper, just a small piece of paper. And written on the piece of paper was a verse from a poem by Thomas Gray. The poem is Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but the verse was just 4 lines. And the verse was, the boast of heraldry, the pomp of power, and all that beauty, all that wealth e'er gave, awaits alike the inevitable hour, the paths of glory lead but to the grave. And it was quite an impact on me, you know. It was like a terma, you know, a hidden teaching that I discovered from my friend Brian. Don't think he knew he was giving me a teaching, but it definitely gave me more conviction to give up my career, such as it was, and devote myself to the Dharma. And eventually, as Jana Dara said, ended up living in England and working over there for a Buddhist charity. But it was the occasion of a real kind of, yeah, this is it. And I'm not saying I had the same kind of experience as Kissa Gotami, where for her, irreversibly, it seems the Dharma eye was open. But for me, it was like no, this is the only thing worth doing in life, you know, because death is a reality, and it happens to us. It's just happened to my friend. So embracing impermanence and noticing impermanence is really, really important, because it is this gateway to understanding. It really, really is. So going back to the Buddha's final exhortation, he said, impermanent are all compound things. So compound things is the next bit. Now, Sangharakshita said in the Survey of Buddhism, he said, anatta means something like insubstantiality, yeah, the ungraspable nature of experience. Anatta is the major premise of the doctrine of anicca. Anicca means impermanence. So what he's saying there is impermanence leads you to really understanding the most important thing, which is anatta, insubstantiality. So by noticing change, we notice that everything is constantly in flux, nothing stands still. That leads us to the discovery that essentially there are no discrete things. So this is either a little idea you have or a world system. There's no kind of concrete thing that you can kind of hold on to and say, this is it. It is unchangeable. It has this fixed essence. It is graspable. And there's nothing like that. The whole thing, the whole shebang is completely ungraspable. In essence, it's ungraspable. Now, dukkha, suffering, arises because we try to grasp onto what is ungraspable. We try to fix and arrange life in such a way that we kind of know where everything is. Things don't change for us, but that is just the road to ruin, you know. Dukkha, unsatisfactoriness. We have to learn to live with the magical display of appearances, the constant flux, how things, whatever they are, don't have any kind of fixed essence. As Tibetans say, they don't exist from their own side. They're not self-made. They are what we call dependently arisen or dependently originated. And this is the major discovery of the Buddha under the Bodhi tree, what's called conditioned co-production or dependent origination, Praticca-Samuppada, the discovery and the realization that nothing exists independently. Everything arises in dependence upon conditions, and in the absence of those conditions, that thing does not arise. Now, if the conditions aren't there to give the arising of that thing, what does that say about that thing? Does it inherently exist or not? You know, if we change any of the conditions, that thing wouldn't be present. This is very, very mysterious, and it's worth spending the rest of your life reflecting on it. Experientially, you know, not just conceptual level. Conceptual level is important to be clear on what's been pointed at, but it must go deeper. It must kind of enter your heart. Impermanence, insubstantiality, anicca, anatta. We must make these part of our life. And notice how everything arises in dependence upon conditions. You know, you pick anything, as I say, an idea, a planet, it all arises in dependence upon conditions. Can you find anything that exists without conditions to give rise to it? I can't. So impermanent are all compound things. So everything is a compound thing. Everything is a compound thing. And they're all impermanent. And seeing the impermanence leads us to realize the conditioned nature of all phenomena. And if we look closely, experientially at the conditioned nature of all phenomena, we begin to open out to what the Buddha discovered. And the next line is, with mindfulness, strive on. And mindfulness is a much misused term, I think. I like the original word, sati. So anapanasati means mindfulness of breathing. Sati means something like remembering remembering. And I like that, because it's like there's something that we've forgotten. There's something that we've forgotten. And that's what, we talk about Shraddha, this beginning of conviction in the Dharma. It's like Shraddha is like, you get a sense of, there's something I've forgotten. I'm beginning to get a little taste of it. I can't quite put my finger on it. It's that sense. And the spiritual life then consists of trying to educate that Shraddha, if you like, try to increase that, try to remember what it is, this thing that we've forgotten. Like a child from a rich home who's wandered amongst the poor, they say. It's like we have this richness, but we've wandered amongst the poor and we've forgotten how rich we are. So when the Buddha attained enlightenment, it's like he remembered something. Now, it's not like remembering where you put your car keys or something like that. We're talking about a complete reorientation of being, so I'm not trying to kind of compare it to a kind of an ordinary remembering of something, but it's like there's something, so to speak, in our being that is yearning to remember this thing. And we will wander lifetime after lifetime, if you go for rebirth and all that kind of stuff, until we finally remember what it is and live from or live in that place. These are all metaphors, not to be taken literally, of course. The Buddha compared what he had discovered to discovering an ancient path in a jungle that had been overgrown, and he kind of hacked away and he rediscovered this path that leads to this delightful kingdom. And there's a passage in the Pali Canon where he describes this delightful kingdom with fountains and all sorts of things. It's just a metaphor, of course, but the image is really, really good. It's like he rediscovered the way to what we call enlightenment, awakening. And then what we have to do is then, walk that path ourselves. He's not going to do it for us. The Buddha just points the way. He drew the map. It is up to us to follow and discover this delightful kingdom for ourselves. And that's what Buddhism is all about. So I like remembering. Yeah, I like it rather than mindfulness, because that's got lots of, I think, incorrect connotations these days. It's a sense of remembering. So if we can notice impermanence experientially, and that leads us into really seeing conditioned co-production, insubstantiality, the ungraspable nature of the magical display of appearances, we will get a glimpse of, even a small glimpse of, what the Buddha discovered under the Bodhi tree. Yeah? So it doesn't mean you're going to see it once and for all, and then, you're fully enlightened. It seems that it generally doesn't work like that. It's like people have a glimpse, and then that glimpse forms the basis of an unfolding, a flowering, and a further deepening of that experiential seeing, until finally complete liberation is achieved, attained, whatever word you want to use. So our task, once we get this little glimpse, is to remember that. What happens is we forget, it's like, how many people have done meditation courses for the Dublin Buddhist Centre over the years, and as far as I can see, the response is generally very positive. People really enjoy them, they get a lot out of them, and then they go back to their life, and what happens? They forget, they forget the positive benefits of it, so they don't return to it. Now, of course, I'm not saying that the Dublin Buddhist Centre is the only way, but there's plenty of other groups and so on. But the point being that there's a forgetting of how good something is, and that's anything, you have a yoga practice, and then you drop it for a while, and you just kind of forget how good it was. So our task is just constantly keep reminding ourselves of this. You can get a little glimpse, some taste, and we've all had some taste. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here right now. There is something in all of us, so to speak. It's like a little flicker, a little flame that wants to be tended to. And we just have to keep tending to that. And what will happen is we forget, we get distracted, we get lost in the so-called world, all the stuff, money, kids, all the rest. And then we remember, like in the mindfulness of breathing, you're with the breath and then you wander off. And then suddenly you notice you've wandered off and you come back again. So our task is to, with diligence, to remember. Yeah. So with mindfulness, strive on. I don't like the word strive because it can have connotations of strive, sort of banging on your shield, kind of striving, which is certainly how I approach it initially. But I just think it means with diligence. There's another word doesn't come to mind right now, but a sense of I'm trying to think of that word. If you want to forget a word, try and remember it in front of a group of people. So being diligent, remembering, and just coming back again and again and again until finally what we called nirvana, where all the obscurations are removed and the luminous mind is allowed, so to speak, to shine brightly. This is all a metaphor. Or as William Blake said, I like William Blake, he said, if the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is infinite. For man has closed himself in till he sees all things through narrow chinks of his cavern. Lovely image. So that was the Buddha's second last teaching, his final exhortation. There's enough there to go for a few lifetimes. But then he gave one more teaching, the final one, number 84,000, which was he died. Okay, and the Buddha died. He was 80 years of age. He described his body as being held together like a cart, held together by bits of string and so on. He had a very bad back. So he was 80 and he died. Now, apparently, he could have lived longer had he been requested to do so. Ananda, who was the Buddha's attendant, had the opportunity to request the Buddha to live longer. And the Buddha kind of dropped a few hints, but Ananda didn't pick up on them. So the Buddha said, that's it, I'm gone. He relinquished the will to live. Now that doesn't mean that he wanted to die, because the Buddha was beyond kind of wanting and not wanting. It just says he relinquished the will to live and he died. And that was the final teaching of the Buddha. The Buddha's dog barking there. And it's really, really interesting. You can kind of think, well, hang on a minute. The Buddha was this compassionate, wise being, and he died. Oh, why doesn't he just come back again and be reborn and help us out here? You might think that. Of course, where the Buddha went after he died was one of the unanswerable questions. So I have no idea where, what the Buddha is, who the Buddha is. It's just one of those unanswerable questions. But the Buddha's final teaching was, by dying, he was saying, well, now it is up to you, don't rely on me as a human being, as an impermanent human being. Look to your own mind. The Buddha will not be found anywhere else apart from your own mind. So the Buddha is nowhere else. The Buddha is your own mind. You get the sense that the Buddha is pointing us back to ourselves. Yeah. And a few years ago, I saw this image, photo of Khenpo Rinpoche, who's a Tibetan Buddhist. Yeah, I saw this, it's in North Wales in a retreat center, and it's a lovely image of Khenpo Rinpoche, and he's doing this. Right? He's got this big smile on his face. He's just doing that, and it's wonderful. It's like he's saying, "You want to find the Buddha? There he is," pointing us right back to ourselves. The Buddha is nowhere apart from our own mind. Yeah. Nowhere apart from our own mind. Now, that doesn't mean that we kind of go, well, I'll just do it on my own, then I don't need anybody else or anything like that. That's to misunderstand it. It's saying, look to your own experience, see for yourself. As the Buddha said, be ye a lamp unto yourselves, be islands unto yourselves. As I said, that does not mean, leaving a Sangha or anything like that, but just rely on your own experience. And through your own experience, you can see what I've seen. That's what the Buddha would say. through your own experience, you can see what I've seen. You can attain what I have attained. The Buddha was born as we are born, as the verse says. So I think I'm going to finish now because I've gone on long enough, but I'll just finish again with the Buddha's first teaching when he walked from Bodh Gaya to Sarnath to meet the group of 5. And again, if you can just imagine his enthusiasm, his excitement, his just desire to share what he had discovered. You know, after 6 years of arduous seeking, he had discovered this thing. And he said, "Listen, bhikkhus, the deathless has been attained. I shall instruct you. I shall teach you the Dhamma. By practicing as you are instructed, you will, by realizing it here and now through direct knowledge, enter upon and dwell in that supreme goal of the holy life, for the sake of which clansmen rightly go forth from the house life into homelessness." I'll leave it there. Okay.
Thanks very much, Osadha. You didn't disappoint. You know, fantastic. Just to hear actually just to dig into those words a little bit more deeply, and also I think what you shared was a real sense of why that would be a good thing to do. That's what I really appreciated as well, as just a sense of the freedom that can come from that. So I really appreciated both the digging into it, what it really means a little bit more deeply, and then just your own enthusiasm actually for the deathless. So thanks. Yeah, really, really good actually. Yeah, fantastic.